Hey there, are you in Mr. Harris's class? Well, I am too, so let's get into how we can survive this together. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name's Caston Day, and I've had Mr. Harris for 2 years. I had him for geometry last year, and I liked him so much that I took Algebra 2 over the summer just so that I could have him again this year for Pre-Cal. Being in Mr. Harris's class for 2 years, I picked up a few tips and tricks that I want to pass on to you guys. The first tip is, and I'm sure you guys have all heard this before, get ahead and stay ahead. Now, I know it might feel like a broken record, but it's true, and it really works. Work hard at the beginning of every unit to get ahead of the pace of the class. That way you won't always be pressured by due dates, and you'll have a good sense of accomplishment. Also, when you get ahead at the beginning of the unit, that gives you plenty of time at the end to prepare for the test and get ready for the next unit. Getting ready for the next unit ahead of time will help you to test out of subjects. That way you don't have to spend a lot more time working through the worksheets if you already know the material. As you can see, if you get ahead early, this will start a loop where you can stay ahead throughout the course of the entire year. You'll find yourself enjoying Mr. Harris's class a lot more, and it'll become a lot easier as the year goes on. Make sure you never let Mr. Harris's work pile up on you. Use your time wisely in class, and make sure you set aside some time after class and during study hall to get your work done as well. Writing your dates down in your plan book will help you make sure that worksheets don't creep up on you. Nothing's worse than arriving to class to realize you have a worksheet due that same day. Keep an updated version of your skeleton outside of class. This will help you keep track of what you've already done and what you still need to do. This way it'll be a lot easier to stay on track with your skeleton so you never fall behind. I'll talk briefly about the skeleton versus the test. Your skeleton is worth 2/3 of your grade, so always get your skeleton done first before you start worrying too much about the test. Don't get me wrong, make sure you study for the test, but your skeleton is worth a lot more. Now that means, of course, that if you get a 0 on the test, but 100 on the skeleton, you'll still have a 66 for that midterm. Mr. Harris has 2 parts to his test. The first part is worth 75% of the test grade, and you take that during class. The second part of the test is worth the remaining 25% of the test grade, and you take that either during conference or during study hall. Typically, the first part of the test is a little bit more straightforward. That'd be stuff that you did throughout the unit and that you're fairly comfortable doing. Don't get me wrong, it's still pretty hard, but you should be able to manage it. The second part of the test, however, is typically a lot more difficult. There's more word problems and analytical situations that you don't always know the answer to. There oftentimes are proofs and other difficult assessments during this part of the test. So make sure you study hard for this part and take your time, but don't slow down. Now, the test typically happens a week or so before the unit actually ends. So there's that time where you're trying to get your skeleton done, but you're also worrying about test corrections. Now, that can be a little bit tricky, but there's a pretty good rule that you should always follow. I always say, do your skeleton before anything else, and that applies for test corrections too. If you only got 1 point off on the test, don't worry about doing corrections. You won't even notice that difference. Keep in mind that the first part of the test is worth more than the second part, so if you're thinking about doing test corrections, do the first part of the test first. Here's a quick statistic if you're wondering if you should do test corrections or your skeleton first. It takes 3 points on a skeleton to raise your midterm grade by 1 point. However, it takes 9 points on your test corrections to raise your midterm grade by 1 point. So, unless it's really easy for you to do test corrections, I always suggest doing your skeleton first. It's just a lot more efficient if you're looking to raise your grade at the last minute. This one I cannot emphasize enough. Take advantage of teacher discussions. Teacher discussions are worth 2 points each in the short term, but they're worth a whole lot more in the long term. If you're ever not sure about something that you're working on, make sure to go ask Mr. Harris. He'd love to help clarify it for you, and after all, that's what he's there for. Another great tip is to get your peer discussion/mentoring time done early. There's nothing worse than waiting for the last minute on those 1-point assignments and then running around to all your peers seeing who needs help or who can give you help. Those rather small assignments are easy to get done during class, and it'll help you gain confidence in the material if you're teaching it to someone else. When you're in a teacher discussion with Mr. Harris, take it seriously, but at the same time, he doesn't have claws and he's not going to bite. Mr. Harris is the perfect person to ask if you don't understand one of the major concepts throughout the unit. But at the same time, it's not really wise to waste his time with typical questions that you could easily get answered by someone else. So, in conclusion, there's 3 major points to Mr. Harris's class. Get ahead and stay ahead. Don't let yourself fall behind on your skeleton, because it'll be a lot harder to catch back up again. The second tip is don't be afraid to talk to Mr. Harris. He's extremely knowledgeable and he's more than happy to help you with any of the questions that you have throughout the unit. The third tip is that your skeleton is the most important part no matter what. Always be sure to prepare for your test, but make sure you finish your skeleton before you start on test corrections. Alright, I think that's all the advice I have for right now, but if you have any more questions, be sure to ask Mr. Harris. So, until next time, see ya!